Hello everyone, I wanted to talk to you about another of my favourite set of rules, being Force on Force, which is a set of wargame rules for the modern period. And I'm going to give you a little demo game with some figures that I've got to show the basics of the rules after this. Force on Force are published, or were published, by Osprey. And they come from a firm called Ambush Alley Games, which is comprised mainly of a couple called Sean and Robbie Carpenter, along with Peggy Carpenter, who is, I believe, one of the wives of one of those two. Osprey published it in 2011. And at that time, they were really just getting into publishing wargames rules. They'd already produced Field of Glory, or published Field of Glory, but they hadn't got to that stage that they're at now, where they're producing regular wargames rules, but all published in a kind of smaller format than this, a sort of thin blue books. And what's happened in the interim is that Force on Force is no longer published by them. You can only obtain these rules now, I think, from eBay. And Ambush Alley itself is in a little bit of a hiatus at the moment. When you go to their website, you see that sadly one of them has suffered a bereavement, and they are planning to bring out a new edition of Force on Force, but it's been put into the background for the time being, unfortunately. But Force on Force are a remarkable set of rules. If you can get hold of it from eBay or something like that, then do so. I can highly recommend them. They are extremely comprehensive, but having said that, they are intended to be basically rules which are infantry centric, but there's everything in here from all different kinds of support weapons, artillery, you name it, it's in here, tanks, armoured vehicles, air support. The list is endless. It's a really interesting game mechanism, which I'll explain a little bit more about when I come to the game. There are basically two types of game that you can play, one being sort of kinetic warfare between two regular forces, and the other being a sort of asymmetric battle between regular and irregular forces. I'm going to show you a game between two regular forces, and I'm going to keep it very simple, just show you how the basic rules work, and not go into a lot of the extra detail. As well as the original rulebook, which is really all you need to play the game. Over the course of 5 years, Ambush Alley have produced a whole number of supplements to this set of rules, each for a different theatre of operations. How many have I got? I've got 5 of them, but there are a lot more than that. So for instance, this one is Special Operations Missions, which, again, interestingly, the earlier scenarios in this book start during the Second World War in 1940. So they have, I think it's like a Guns of Navarone type battle in here, as well as a rescue mission on a Pacific island, US Marines against Japanese trying to rescue some prisoners of war. There's this one here that I've got, Cold War Gone Hot, which is World War III, set in a theoretical World War III, set in 1986. Bush Wars, set in Africa between 1960 and 2010. This one interests me because I've got a lot of 15mm figures that I use for AK-47, but I've also got a lot still unpainted, so I've always intended to paint those figures up and use them with this sort of wars. You can use any scale you want, 15mm or 28mm. The ranges and things like that don't alter. This one here is Vietnam, Ambush Valley. The other one I've got is Fallujah, so the Iraq War 2004. And on top of that, they've also brought out a sci-fi version of the wars, which is sort of called Tomorrow's War. It's sort of a future wars, so it's set in the near future, but it introduces extraplanetary kind of conditions such as low gravity, lack of atmosphere, that kind of thing. And on top of that, they brought out a supplement to Tomorrow's War, which is called by Dagger or Talon, which is introduces xeno life forms, so alien life forms and such like. So, as you can see just from that brief run through of the books that I've got, it's a really wide-ranging set of rules, and great fun to play, which I hope I'll be able to demonstrate by giving you a little run through of a game I've got set up. So I'm going to give you a demo game which is set in Grozny in the 1990s, and it's a battle between two regular forces, the Russians and the Chechens. I'm describing the Chechens as regular rather than irregular because they were so well organised and had a great deal of military experience. The Chechens formed quite a significant proportion of the Russian armed forces, so they had a lot of military experience and were a match for the Russian forces, especially during the First War in the 1990s. So I'm going to keep it simple and call them both regular. And you need to really, with any game of force on force, wherever it's set, put a lot of scenery down on the table. And that's because the weapon ranges far exceed the distance on the table. That's not to say that weapon fire isn't more effective when it comes into closer range, which I'll show you later. But any weapon on the table, even a handgun, has an effective range which goes beyond the bounds of the table. So you need to break up line of sight. Otherwise you're just playing on a billiard table type surface, and it gets very unrealistic and out of control really. So I've put as much scenery down as I can, and I've invented a kind of scenario which is that there is a Russian tank crew which has bailed out of its crippled vehicle, and they are hiding in this area here. There are 4 of them. One of them has a light wound, which you'll see later in the game. Wounds are significant to units in that they slow you down, make it harder for you to fight and so on. He only has a light wound, which means he can still contribute to that unit's fire power, but if they want to move at anything faster than tactical speed, they have to roll a dice to check that they can do it. So it's going to slow the unit down. And the rest of them, he has a handgun, the rest of them have submachine guns. So they're only equipped with weapons which are effectively going to kind of allow them to fight in close combat and close up, but not really engage in the battle as such. And the aim of the game from the Russians' point of view is to rescue those four crew members, tank crew members, and bring them off of this side here, bring them off of this table edge. The force is broken up into fire teams, and each fire team, whatever the standard weapon they're carrying, it's just classified as a rifle. So what have they got? Something like, I don't know what they are, AK-47, something like that. But the standard weapon and the standard figure carrying it is just called a rifleman in this set of rules, and it doesn't matter whether one side or the other has a better quality of weapons, because that comes into the troop quality dice that they roll, not there isn't a factor to bump up a superior quality of weapon. That all comes into the quality of the troop type. So this fire team here, which is composed of 6 figures, has a leader, it has 3 riflemen, it has a heavy support weapon, and what's called an SAW, which I think is a squad activated weapon. So that's a support weapon. And all of the Russian side's fire teams are similarly composed, other than one that I'll show you in a second. So there's another group of 5 figures there. I think they've only got rifles, yeah. They've only got rifles, but they've got 1 leader. There's another unit here which has got a rocket-propelled grenade on one of the figures, which is a different type of support weapon. There's another heavy support weapon here with this team, and at the far end here there is an anti-tank missile with the team, and the anti-tank weapon has both an anti-personnel and an anti-tank factor, so it can be used against buildings and against personnel. It's a very effective weapon, especially when used with a team, in this, which this is. It really bounces up their fire factor, and it's an intimidating weapon as well, so it has a damaging effect on the enemy's morale. But these, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fire teams have got to somehow make their way across the table, across all this desolate, ruined city, get to the tank crew and rescue them. And the Chechens only start with a few of their units on the table. There's one here, similarly kind of composed. There'd be a leader, which is the guy with the mobile phone there. There's a support weapon, rocket-propelled grenade, 3 riflemen. Similar kind of thing there. That unit there only composed of 3 figures. But they do have as well, hidden in this building here, a sniper, who I'll tell you a little bit more about as we play the game, how he operates. And they've got 2 units that aren't on the table yet, and they will come on. Another interesting variant of the rules, via a hotspot.
So what you have to imagine is that there are drains and sewers and underground tunnels and so on dug into this landscape. And there are 5 areas on the table, 2 of which I've decided have to be in the Russian half of the table, which are underneath these 5 kind of small areas of rubble. So this is one, that's another one there, so that's 2 of them. There are 3 others, one there, one here, and one right at the back there, that set of tyres. And from turn 3, at the start of turn 3 and turn 4, the Russians will roll the dice to see which one of those 5 hotspots a unit emerges from. So, in other words, the Russians might be taken by surprise by units emerging in their rear. And part of the Russians' aim is to neutralise all 5 of these hotspots. And again, I'll show you how they do that as the game progresses. So that's the game as it's set up. What else about the terrain? Most of the terrain just stops you moving at rapid speed. So in order to cross any of this terrain, you have to move at tactical speed. Most of it gives you some kind of cover, apart, I'm going to say, from these wire fences which are there, and there's another little bit over there, but the rest of it will give you a bonus for cover. If you're in any of these templates here, you don't have to be specifically behind a wall. You're going to get cover just from being in that template. The taller stuff like these buildings, that building there, the freight containers, that kind of thing, this chimney, all block line of sight, but the smaller items such as the hotspots, the barricades, the sandbagged areas, you can see over, but they still give you cover. And I scratch built some time ago. This is supposed to be a collapsed apartment building. This I'm actually going to define as hazardous terrain, so it not only blocks line of sight, but there's a risk to any units that try to move across it, which is another nice part of the rules, that the terrain itself can inflict injury on you. So vertical terrain and water obstacles and so on can cause your team to suffer various types of casualty. And again, I'll hopefully show you how that works during the rules. And the final kind of complication I've added to the terrain is that this flat area here, starting there and going all this way up here as far as here, is a minefield. And again, I'll show you how that works in the rules, but obviously you can suffer injuries by attempting to cross it.